I'm just happy to be at the table, to be a team player, to help sustain the school, because it's done so much for me. I mean, as far as eye-opening experiences, relationships, in my career, everywhere I've been, there's been somebody from a Hamilton connection that's had some impact on every move I've made, pretty much. It's been amazing.
Dave Bolger here, and welcome to Had I Known, conversations with interesting members of the Hamilton College community. This week's guest is Mason Ashe, class of 1985. All right, back to the world of sports this week. I can't ever venture too far from that world, I guess. Always been a big sports fan. When I was at Hamilton, I thought I wanted to pursue a career in sports media and sports. And here I am many years later, actually working in sports. So anytime I have an opportunity to speak to someone who has built a career in the world of professional sports, I'm always interested. But before we get into that, I had an incredible sports experience just this evening. I'm recording this on Saturday night before pushing it live tomorrow morning on Sunday. And I'm just back from my first ever live professional soccer game. Got a chance to go check out the New England Revolution in Foxborough, Massachusetts. And boy, it was fun. My daughter's soccer team got free tickets, so we got to go. I got to go with my daughter, and we both got to experience big-time soccer. I know if you're like a real European football fan, debatable that that's real soccer, but what do I know? They looked pretty darn good, and it was a lot of fun. And what was especially fun, you never know when you're going to run into Hamilton alums. I got to spend time with Paul Ryan, class of 2002, a friend of mine and former rugby teammate who apparently is the Revolution's number one fan. Has incredible seats. If you ever see a game on TV, look for Paul because you will see him. I think if his seats were any better, he'd have they'd be passing him the ball. But always good to catch up with good friends. Never know when you're going to run into someone from Hamilton, and I got a chance to do that. So a great night. Sports brings people together. And in the case of this week's guest, Mason Ashe, sports can provide a fulfilling lifelong career. Mason is a sports agent, attorney, talent manager, and also an educator. Oh, and he happens to be a Hamilton trustee. So there was a lot to dig into in getting into Mason's background and the work he does. And I did want to spend time with him talking about being a trustee. But boy, he was getting into so many great stories about his background and how he got into being an agent and a talent manager that I left precious little time to get into his work as a trustee. But he shares some great insight into what it took to get him to where he is in his career. For over 30 years, he's worked as both a sports and entertainment attorney, talent manager, industry advisor, and sports agent. He served as the lead contract negotiator, legal advisor, and brand strategist for professional athletes associated with the NBA, WNBA, NFL, FIBA, and esports. He's done it for pro and college coaches, social media content creators, entertainers, on-air personalities, celebrity chefs, authors, film producers. The list just goes on and on and on and on and on. He's currently the founder and CEO of Ashe Sports and Entertainment Consulting, where he does all that work, and he talks a lot about that. Oh, and in addition to that, for 15 years, he's been a professor, teaching at schools like the Howard University School of Law, the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania, and he's the academic director of the Georgetown University Summer Sports Industry Management Academy for high school students. So there are a lot of people who pay a lot of money to learn from this man. So you do well to pay attention to this conversation because he shares quite a lot of insight and knowledge and what it takes if you want to get into this sort of work. This is one of those conversations where I could have just sat and listened for hours. Chock full of amazing stories, and I know I only scratched the surface here. but I hope you enjoy it. Here's my conversation with Mason Ashe, class of 1985. Hello, sir.
How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Very well, thanks.
Your Zoom background is a hell of a lot better than mine.
Well, it's almost the weekend, so I'm on the back porch.
Good for you. Good for you. Thank you for doing this. I very much appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And I know it sounds like you've been a busy man, so I doubly appreciate it.
It is that time of the year, and I'm supposed to be taking vacation time, but you can't say it. And then it's always the time for deals in sports. So it's like right at that point where family wants to relax and the industry wants to pipe up because it's starting to get ready for basketball season.
Yeah,
international stuff is already going on. So
yeah.
It's a tough time.
So you're running around the world trying to get people signed. Is that what's going on right now?
Yeah. That and scouting some new people, showcasing guys that I have, and then when the deals come in, you got to do it. And they're in Argentina, they're in Italy, they're in Spain, they're in Kosovo. I mean, there's all sorts of different places, and the time zones don't cooperate. So I don't know where I am half the time.
Truly a global game, huh?
It is that. It is that for sure. Yeah.
And I hear you on the ramp up. So I work for the NFL, and
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. I work in marketing at the league, and it's getting ready for my third season. And for years prior to working at the NFL, Labor Day was a big family vacation time for us. And the first time I tried it and it didn't work, the season, there was maybe about 2-3 weeks ago, I woke up one morning, the season has already begun for us. Like it's
yeah. No, for me, in the first, 30 years ago, I was both football and basketball agent.
Yeah.
I don't do football now, but for 20 years I did football, and my anniversary is September 1st, my wedding anniversary. And every time I tried to take my wife to St. Thomas or to the Caribbean somewhere, somebody would get cut in the last, training camp cut. And I had to get in a message to the beach, excuse me, sir, you have a message at the front desk. And I'm like, what? My wife is like, you're not leaving the beach, are you? I'm like, I just got to go make sure and see who it is. She says, you know who it is. He gets cut every year this time of year. And this guy played like 8 years, right? But every year I had to get him another team right while we're on vacation every time, because he gets cut and you got to hurry up and find him another team before all of the spots fill up, right?
Oh my goodness.
It's like, okay. She was like, can you work this out a different way? Or can you get guys who make the team? How about that?
Well, that's interesting. So that's one of the things I wanted to ask you about doing the work you do is, there's the view of the sports agent that is largely built by the media, Jerry Maguire, and, an occasional profile that's done. But I imagine there's a lot of hustle and a lot of work that people don't see, that don't understand about the job. What is it? What don't people understand about the work you do?
I would say, there's a lot of things, but I would say probably one of the things that surprises people sometimes is that we're not as appreciated for the hours we put in and the 24/7 coverage that we give talented people. You would think that we get a lot of gifts and thank yous and gratitude shown our way for the diligence that we put in to compensate and accommodate behavior patterns that are not necessarily one that we would advocate for, but because our clients are, young people often and talented and have not learned sometimes some of the social graces and some of the etiquette and some of the just ways to communicate gratitude and appreciation and loyalty. They just sometimes have not learned that. And so we have to not take it personally, and we have to continue to be loyal and diligent. And it's just, we do a great contract. The player will say, that's because I'm a great player, not that you're a great agent. If they get less than they want, then we obviously stink as an agent. I'm like, well, but I can only leverage what you give me.
Right.
We're not magicians, and I often get, in that vein, I get often invitations to represent people that I just don't accept the invitation for, because there's not enough there for me to sell and to even find them a job. I think that I'm a good negotiator, but I have to get to that stage of it. Sometimes people are calling me to get in the game. They're trying to become pro and they haven't been that yet. And they went to either a small school or they had off year. or because of COVID now, they didn't play last year. And so teams in Europe and other places are saying, well, the person didn't play. So, but the player is saying, if you're a good agent, you're supposed to make this happen. You know, supposed to change their mind, persuade them that that doesn't matter. I'm like, well, that does matter to a lot of people that you haven't played in a game in a year and a half.
Yeah.
You know, and they want to make sure you're in shape, your timing is good, you know, it's for basketball purposes. But it's the expectation that people have that we deliver. And then when we do, we don't often get the credit.
Interesting. And then when a deal gets signed, what's the job after that? So people understand an agent helps a player get signed and negotiates a contract. Once the deal is done, what are you doing for that client afterwards?
Well, first of all, we'd have to back up and go to the beginning as to what do I do for people, right?
Yeah.
And so when someone tells me that they are interested in being a professional talent, that means that they're going to be paid in a couple of different ways if everything goes right. They don't often understand the different buckets of revenue that they are eligible for. And so I will explain typically in the beginning of the relationship that my goal is to fill up 3 buckets of revenue for you. First bucket being your primary income from your primary employer that allowed you to call yourself a professional. You know, often if you're in a restaurant and somebody tells you, you know, they're a professional actor, but they're in between jobs, you know, like, okay, well, when was the last time you had a job? I mean, well, I haven't really had one yet, but that means you're not a professional actor yet. Somebody has to pay you.
You're not being paid to do the work. Yeah, right.
To be a professional. Somebody's a basketball player who's never been paid to play professionally. You're not a professional yet. You may have turned professional. You turned pro, but you haven't been a professional yet, right? So bucket 1 has to happen. All right. So there's bucket 1. If you do bucket 1 well enough, then I'm going to push for bucket 2 revenue, which is leveraging bucket 1. If you do bucket 1 so well, you become either popular or famous, or you get in these times you get a following, right? And so that's who's a celebrity is someone with a following, someone who has influence over the public. And so if that's the case, then I have to fill revenue bucket 2 from endorsements, associations, or affiliations. People will pay you to affiliate with a neighborhood. I've had people give lots to celebrities to say that they live in this cul-de-sac of a new development so that the price value of the lots go up immediately after they can say so-and-so lives here. Yeah. Whoa, so everybody wants to be next to or near or in the cul-de-sac of that person. Whether or not they're going to be there a lot or not, they own that lot. Yeah. So people will pay you to associate with the development. Sometimes people will pay you to pitch their product, you know, to be an ambassador of their product. And, you know, but that's something that you're not doing like bucket 1. Bucket 1, you have to perform. Bucket 2, you're just associating. You're allowing someone to use your name, image, and likeness. You may be, you know, basically endorsing somebody else's product or service or party. People pay you to show up at a party. I have models I represent or professional athletes get paid $10,000 just to show up for an hour at the VIP, and so that the party planner or the club can say, "This is where the best people hang out." You know, the pretty people. Yeah. So you get bucket 2, not necessarily from performing, but from being associated with. And then bucket 3 is that revenue that a lot of people don't know about, is the intellectual property revenue, where you get paid royalties for copyright, trademark, or patent. And a lot of times, the wealthiest, talented people have made more money in bucket 3 than they did bucket 1. Michael Jordan made more money with Jumpman logo that he licensed to Nike than he did ever playing basketball. Arnold Palmer made more money with his deal with Arizona Tea Company than he did ever playing golf in bucket 1, right? His association, his trademark that he owns, that he licensed out, paid more. Sean John clothing wear paid P. Diddy more money in clothing than he ever did in apparel than he ever did producing music in bucket 1, right? So that bucket 3 is that really long-term quiet money that a lot of celebrities or athletes either don't think about, or they're just not, you know, or if you're a songwriter, right? So you're going to get the copyright royalty. You might make a certain amount of money in bucket 1 if you sing it, but how many songs made more money the second time? It was remade by somebody else, but the songwriter got the royalties for the copyright. And so you got the benefit. If the Beatles redo your song better than you ever did it in bucket 1, you might make more money in bucket 3 by licensing it to the Beatles. Right. Yeah. So that's, when I see talent and I'm representing talent, that's my spectrum of perspective. It's not just the contract's over right? And then I have nothing else to do. It's really, if I'm going to maximize your 3 bucket revenue, then that's what I'm thinking about. But then on top of that, there's an assumption that I'm on call 24/7 to assist the talented person with anything that comes up in their life. And so that in sports, that's assumed that the agent is just going to be there for no additional money to advise them on anything, where to live, where to go, where to vacation, how to deal with relationship problems, how to hire all the other third party professionals, whether it be an accountant or a wealth manager or an architect or a jeweler or a car dealer. When they deal with any of those other people, they assume that the agent is going to be there or be available to guide them for no additional cost. So that's why the job's really never done. But if you have a player or a talented person who's making $1 million and you're making 5%, okay, you get $50,000 for every million they make, right? But if a person's making $10,000 or $100,000 and you're getting $5,000, but you're on call 24/7 all year, doesn't sound like a sweet deal.
Right.
So the other accommodation stuff that's thrown in is the same for the person making 100,000, as the person making $1 million or 10 million. But it's just the more money they have, the more things they get into. But they still need attention and they still want guidance and stuff like that. So the comprehensive agent is always on call.
Always on. Wow. Does the job allow any time you just say no ever, or that phone rings, you have to pick it up?
You have to pick it up, but then you have to find ways to schedule. You have to tell people, listen, I'm going to be available after a certain hour, or you may pick up and say, hey, I'm busy right now, but can I call you in 3 hours? Can I call you in the morning? Depending on how you manage your time, you have to sort of figure out a way to encourage people that are trying to reach out to you to fit into some kind of schedule that's not going to drive you crazy. You have to control your schedule, and I teach 1 day a week at Wharton Business School in Philly at Penn, and then I teach on Tuesday nights in DC at Howard Law School, 3 hours, and so then I have 30 students in Howard School class, and I have like 65 in my undergrad Wharton class who all want career advice. They want to talk to me about the lecture we just had. They want to talk about summer jobs. They want to talk about, how do you get your first client and stuff that's outside of the classroom lecture. So then if you got 100 people in a week that are not paying clients, these are just students that they paid you to lecture them, but you also have to have some office hours. Then it becomes a real time management exercise, to do that and manage your professional client base, which I do now through a law firm as well. I have an agency, but now I just joined a law firm as well. And so I do some of when I talked about the 3 buckets, that's my agent work. But now that I'm also at a firm, then there's 30 other areas of law that, the player or anybody may need: real estate, business, tax, immigration, domestic relations. All these things come out of me doing a contract for a person. Then all of a sudden they say, hey, I think I want to get married. Or, hey, somebody says that they had my child, so I have to go find an expert in domestic relations or family law to either do, paternity tests, or we're going to do a prenuptial agreement, or we're going to do child support payments, or we're going to, we got to deal with all that stuff. But I have to refer that to somebody that's in that department, in that area. And when I'm in an agency, I have to go to a law firm, outside counsel, and refer it. Now that I'm in a full service national firm, it's one of my colleagues inside the firm that'll be doing that. But all of that becomes additional services outside of the 3 buckets is my primary focus. But also then liaison into the other things that they need with the other services that are legally based. Then I have to, pick somebody internally to handle that. And if somebody's not really the right person to fit the right client that I have, then I have to go outside the firm and pick another co-counsel somewhere and still monitor all that to make sure that it's happening, because the player is assuming, or the artist is assuming, that I'm still involved.
You're taking care of it. They called you to take care of it. So it's on you.
It'll get done through me.
Right. And to your point earlier, if it doesn't go well, it's your fault.
It's my fault. They get in a dispute with somebody at a nightclub, and it turns into something legal or criminal or whatever, civil, and I'm not a litigator, but they call me, so I got to hook them up with somebody in that state
Yeah.
And make sure that it's resolved to their satisfaction, even if they were wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. That's wild. Back to the buckets for a moment. Do you find yourself having to spend time getting your clients to focus on bucket one? Is there an impulse quickly to jump to 2 and 3 to make more money? And 2 and 3, to your point, can't come unless bucket one is.
Yeah, there's no
Yeah.
two. There's no two if you don't have a following. So
Right.
there's no car dealership or beverage company or overnight carrier or anybody that's going to put you in a commercial if nobody knows who you are.
Right. Right.
And that you don't have any consumer influence.
Yeah.
So you don't get consumer influence unless you perform bucket one to such an extent that you stand out and and you become well known and well respected in that. So they need to focus on that first.
Yeah.
And then, so like rookies, for instance, sometimes rookies when they get drafted, they're ready to do that 2 or 3 because they're like, "Hey, I'm a first round pick." I said, "Yeah, but you really haven't made the team yet. You just got drafted, And there are some trading card companies and there are some sneaker companies that will give them a deal to pitch or be the ambassador of that particular product, even before the season starts, their rookie season starts, because they were a first round pick. So with that comes some status. And there's a few things that you might get, but otherwise you should focus on getting yourself ready for training camp and actually making the team, even though you were drafted, and earning minutes on the court or on the field as a rookie, because that's not going to be a given. You have to focus on that. And so if I'm trying to have you all over the place on national commercials with shampoo commercials and you're doing all sorts of esports, video game commercials and all this stuff, as opposed to making the team and getting minutes your rookie year, your focus is not properly placed.
Right. And then you talked before about in your travels that you've been scouting. So there's an element of having to be a true talent scout, not unlike the teams would employ scouts to recognize talent. How do you hone that skill? I mean, there's law school, there's learning how to negotiate and deal with contracts, but then there's also just, you need to know the game, right?
Well, even before the negotiation, well, I guess that goes along with that is that in my background, it came in a different sequence. So when I left Hamilton College, I had a junior summer internship in sales management and brand management with Procter & Gamble. Mm-hmm. And so I never heard of brand management and sales management before that. And so they gave me a territory, they gave me training in Cincinnati at the world headquarters. And then I took a permanent full-time job after my senior year at Hamilton to go to Procter & Gamble to do that for real, not just as a summer intern, and did that for a year. And so I really got a handle on this whole idea of the power of persuasion and how to sell. So when we talk about, I guess, the roles that we are getting used to, sales was important, right? Once I found somebody that I wanted to represent,
you got to sell them that you're the guy for them.
That I'm the guy. Yeah. But who should I sell? Like who are the players? Right. That's the hardest part of a rookie agent in the beginning. You think you know talent. And so you might go to a summer league basketball game and say, "Oh, number 6, I think that person is great. I think he should be in the NBA. I'm going to approach him after the game. After the game, you go up to him. Hey, how you doing? I'm so-and-so. Do you have an agent?" "No, I don't have an agent." "Oh, great. I'm a lawyer. I'm an agent. I'm certified by the NBA Players Association. I'm also certified by the the Federation of International Basketball, FIBA. I can get you a job anywhere in the world or here in the NBA. Can I represent you?" Well, I don't know anything about you. So then you got to give them your pitch. Mm-hmm. Well, that's where Procter & Gamble kicks in. My whole sales pitch thing, it kicks right in, right? Boom. Well, I have a little format that they taught us, and I go through that. Boop, boop, boop. He says, "Sure." And then he signs the paperwork, he becomes my client. And then I go shop him to the proper league, whatever it is.
Yeah.
They tell me this guy's a bum. "What are you talking about? He's a bum. He's not employable." I'm like, "What do you mean?" I saw him playing a summer league game. He's 6'7". He looks like, Atlas. I'm like, "Are you serious? He's got this person I thought can play." And then I've had the old school scouts back in the day, 30 years ago, used to curse me out. They would bless me out. So now you're a scout, huh? I'm like, "What do you mean?" "You do what you do, I do what I do." I'm like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "You do contracts, I do talent. You ask me if he has skills. You don't tell me he has skills." I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. "Young man, you're going to call a veteran scout and tell me that I missed somebody? Is that what you're telling me?" that this guy's a diamond in the rough that slipped through my fingers. And I cover this territory for the Southeast. You're trying to tell me I miss somebody. No, I'm not saying that at all, sir. I'm just saying I have somebody that's hired me to pitch him. Well, you learn how to talk to me about, considering him before you tell me that you think he's got talent. I don't care what you think he has. I'm like, oh my God. Wow.
Wow.
That's the NFL guys. I mean, they put me through it.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, so that when I started calling them, excuse me, I got hired by a person I'd like you to consider, and I'd like to show you some video or send you the stats or whatever I can do to help you evaluate them, period.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not,
yeah.
I think this person can help you win games. I think this person should be on your team. I think this person's better than who you've already drafted and already whatever. Do not say those things, right? So I learned. So then eventually, once I started building a relationship with team scouts, I would call them ahead of time. Okay, new season starting from college. I'm based in North Carolina back in the day, early on. I'd say my business plan was a 5-hour radius of Winston-Salem. So I'm like, okay, well, that's the ACC conference, the CIAA and the MEAC, Historically Black College Conference. There was some of the SEC conference within that 5-hour radius, like University of Tennessee. I can get to Knoxville from Winston-Salem in 3 or 4 hours. I can get down to Atlanta, Georgia Tech. So I had a certain little circle, UVA, I could get up to. And so I called the scouts that I knew for teams that were covering that area and say, who do you think is going to be good this upcoming season? Mm-hmm. Anybody that you scouted that stood out? And by the way, I can take you to lunch if you like. And they're like, oh, okay. I like such and such a restaurant. I want to go to Ruth Chris and I like popping hot gumbo. Okay, cool. You're going to get all the popping hot gumbo you can if I can look at your notes. And so all of a sudden I started having a relationship with scouts that were telling me, hey, there's a kid in your backyard at this small school that people are overlooking. Hey, there's this kid that runs a 4.240 down in Montgomery, Alabama, who was the track star at Auburn, who transferred over to Troy State. Nobody knows this kid. He's got 4.2 speed. He can't run routes, but he can run kickoff returns. He's going to be a decent receiver. Whoa, really? I go screeching down to Montgomery, meet the kid. He's like, how'd you know about me? I'm like, hey, don't worry about that. And this kid has pure speed. I mean, 4.240 speed is like in the 40 yard dash. Well, the meteor. It was, so I started picking up tips from the agents, from the scouts who basically liked me. They were like, you're a young kid. You approached me the right way. You bought me lunch. I'm going to tell you who I think is special that you probably might have a shot at with limited experience. There's some other guys that are going to be early round picks. You're not going to get their attention. Yeah. So early on, I had to learn who were the real diamonds in the rough, but I didn't pick them. I was given a tip by the agents, by the scouts who went down, and their job is to scour all the schools.
Sure.
And then they start ranking, and they would say, this guy's going to be a 4th or 5th round pick, but he's really a talent, right? You got Tom Brady was went in the 6th round. So that doesn't mean he just wasn't prime in his rookie year, but he became the best quarterback ever, right? So you can get a mid to late round person that's going to be a late bloomer, perhaps.
Right.
But it's hard for me to pick that person. Because I haven't been trained to watch hundreds and thousands of people who run and catch and run routes and who's going to be what in 3 years. They can see a linebacker and say, oh, he's going to be a down lineman in 3 years. But right now he's an outside lineman, or they're going to put 10 pounds on this guy and make him a rush in. Right. I'm like, really? How do you see all that? It's like walking a house as an old house and you can see what it could be, I don't have that kind of vision.
Yeah. And it's pure, excuse me. It's pure investment speculation, right? And
it is.
And you are literally putting investment into the time, the way you just explained what the job is. If you miss on a prospect and sign him, and then you're wasting so much time that could be placed on someone else who might hit it. So, you really got to get those decisions right when you're picking clients. Wow. You
really do. If you don't, then you are setting yourself up for wasted resources.
Right.
And you know what? It is unfortunate, but that's just part of the business, and unless you have good intel, you're going to miss a lot.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of people don't survive in this business, because if you miss too many times and you spend too many of your resources that were probably earned through a different job, until this could take care of itself, until it's self-sustaining, then you're reinvesting other resources that you've earned And then when it's self-sustaining, you're reinvesting what you've learned from this. And, and to some degree, you have to get a combination of draft picks and veteran free agents. A combination is what keeps you survive. It keeps you in the business. You can't just survive. I've seen agents go out of business with great rookies 2 or 3 years in a row, but the 2 or 3 years in a row is not enough because the money that rookies pay you it doesn't sustain you like that. And so meanwhile, the agents who have veteran free agents who they've had for 3 or 4 years, and all of a sudden they get a new deal that's 3 or 4 times bigger than rookie deals. Now you have enough surplus to kind of reinvest into rookies as opposed to, just relying on just rookies every year. You can't, it doesn't survive. You can't get past the threshold of self-sustaining. And then they have to make more than what bucket one. I mean, you get lucky with a guy that can make some 2, and 3 is really a stretch. Everybody doesn't get the bucket 3. But,
right. As you said, that's a long-term play.
It's a long-term play, and it's also a very special person.
Right.
To have the ability to get a copyright on something that they think of and write down, or have the vision of a logo or a symbol or a phrase or something that catches. That's such a lightning. I mean, that's like a lightning bolt striking something. You don't know when lightning is going to strike like that. So, but if it does, that's where you sustain. You got an artist or athlete that's been doing something for a while. If they don't do bucket 3, once they finish playing, it's over. You don't hear about them. You don't see them. There's nothing about it. It's done. They go back to their hometown and, get a job in the mill.
Right. Given the state of basketball and college basketball, guys coming out so early, how young do you start looking at guys?
If you asked me that question 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, and now, the answer is going to be different because the rules have changed as to when they could come out. 1 and done, 2 straight from high school. At different times, right? You were able to get them right out of high school. So you couldn't wait for them to get to college because they didn't go. Right. LeBron never went to college. Right. So when his sweepstakes was going on, he was in high school, he was playing in arenas and everybody was like, whoa, all the agents were trying to flood, Akron to try to meet him and all this stuff. We didn't even go. We were like, there's a lot of people that are going to leverage their entire careers on trying to get him as a client. And it's too many people in line, So, but there are some mega stars like him that if you land, then you're cemented, for many years in survival. You're okay if he holds on to you for enough years to do the job. I think he held on to his guy for the first 2 or 3 years or whatever, and then he, switched up. But the deals they did in the first 2 or 3 years were pretty heavy, But the guy really leveraged a lot, to get to him and focused a lot on him during that, and that's really, a risk that you're going to ignore or maybe neglect some of your current guys and other businesses to really be there all the time for a high school kid for the year that he's coming out being seen and trying to build that bond in the family and all that stuff. That's a real risk, So, but that's a unique scenario. Most of the time, you are depending on what kind of agent you are. I mean, some agents, I don't mind waiting until a person finishes his college one way or the other. And if he's going to go 4 years, fine, 3 years, fine, whatever. I don't have a problem waiting, I don't prefer to talk to high school kids about anything like that. You're usually, talking to the parents anyway. You're not talking to the high school kids. Because they don't, what are you going to talk to them about? I'm just, even when I was 30 years younger, you call them, even college guys, you call them and, what are you talking about? How's your day? Whatever. There's some agents that get into that and they can talk to them about nothing. I don't really like nothing conversations. So it's hard for me to talk about. And the guy would call you, hey, I'm getting ready to talk to my friend here. Call me back in 30 minutes. Okay. And you call him back in 30 minutes. Hey, I think I'm getting ready to go on this date with this girl. Can you call me back around 11? I'm like, are you serious? I'm a grown man. I'm like, I'm trying to talk to you about the industry. Okay. But when you're a young agent, you got to do that. Call him back at 11. His roommate's like, no, he didn't come back yet. Okay. But you got to keep calling him, This is how it was back in the 90s, when I first started. And I was like, okay, this got to be an easy way to do this. But back then we didn't even have cell phones and we didn't have text messaging and we didn't have social media. So you had to just keep calling the room, and you got to catch them, Or some agents would go and hang out outside the dorm in wherever it is, Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and, wait for him to leave the dorm and try to walk in front of him on his way to the cafeteria. I'm like, okay, that's got to be the craziest thing in the world, right?
Yeah.
If you're a grown person that's a lawyer and you find yourself, stalking somebody on their college campus just to run into him because he won't answer the phone, it's like, so I preferred referrals. I preferred, communicating with the coach, communicating with the parents, let them set the meeting up, as opposed to assuming that this kid is going to be sophisticated enough to honor an appointment, or whatever. Most of the time early on, I would call the assistant coach or the head coach or the parents and ask them, what kind of process are you going to use to screen and meet agents? Sometimes they'll say, we're going to have meetings in the beginning of the season of this last year, or we're going to have meetings, now, and he's a rookie, he's a freshman, and we're going to see who we like, and then don't call us anymore until we're finished with college, whether it's year 2, 3, or whatever.
Yeah.
I've had people say, don't call me, and I didn't. And at the end of the season of the school semester, I call them, and they said, you're the only person that listened. I'm gonna go with you. I had a guy that stayed with me for 10 years because he was at University of Maryland, and he was like, I told these agents don't call me. They all call me anyway. And you're the only person that's calling at the end of the season like I asked you to do. And I respect that fact. You respected me. I was like, wow, that's unique. How about that? But more times than not, you call that person and they say, where were you? And I'm like, you told me not to call you. You said you wanted to enjoy your semester. He said, yeah, but every other agent called me. You're too late now. I have a bond with this person who's giving me advice along the way. I was like, advice? What kind of advice? You have coaches. You don't need an agent giving you advice while you're playing in your senior year. Get out of here. So sometimes it gets used against you because you listen,
Right.
But that's just the nature of the business. I mean, to me, the magic has to happen between you and this player. And if it doesn't happen, if there's some connection, some kind of way, whether it's in person or over the phone, or, if the magic doesn't happen, you don't have a relationship. And you really need something to happen. That bond has to happen. And you find sometimes with certain players who didn't have maybe a male figure in their life who they trusted, then they don't trust you no matter what you say, because you're just another guy that's trying to deceive them and they can't rely on because that's the experience they've had. And I have found sometimes that manifests itself even if they hire me. They don't want to pay me on time. They don't want to listen to the advice I'm giving them. And I'm like, you know what? This really, on the front end, I have to assess this person, this personality,
right,
and to see whether or not they are capable. Are they so hurt and are they so emotionally damaged that they cannot bond with me? They cannot respect my advice. They cannot pay me on time or what my worth is.
Yeah,
because they just don't see it in a healthy way.
And how much time? How many interactions do you have with a potential client to be able to suss that out? I mean, is this
not that many? Not that many. Not for me. Not for me, because I don't spend all my time trying to talk to potentials. But there's some agents that do. There's some agents that have junior people in their firm. That's all they do is to build that, and they constantly talk to those people, and then they hand them over to the agent at the end of this. I didn't have that kind of recruiter kind of thing. I did have people who referred stuff to me. Business people that knew the family, or people that knew the parents, or coaches that used to coach the person would call me and set that kind of thing up. But for the most part, I didn't make cold calls to the player and just keep hammering them until he just relents. That just wasn't my style. I'd rather you be referred to me by somebody you respect, and I come and meet you a couple of times, perhaps, if you want that. If you don't want that, like early on, I would go to games and I'd just say, I'd wave to the family and the player going into the tunnel. Hey, I'm here. Just letting you know I'm here. Hey, good job. I'm out. I'm not trying to hang around and then they just like the fact that you came to a couple games. Hey, I saw you at a couple of my games this season. That's right. I was there. I waved at you, but I wasn't trying to get in your head. I wasn't trying to, really to recruit you like that, but to show you that I'm evaluating your game. I'm spending some time to understand and support your program. And then you tell the coaches too, I'm here. Hey, I'm supporting you. They want people to support their program so that if you do a good job with that player and they get a good job in the pros, the coach is going to leverage that and say, hey, you come to our school, you can get to the pros, and we have the support of the best agents that come here. They leverage everything that works that way.
Interesting.
And so you want to do that, but at different phases though. If you ask me, like I said, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, I have a different answer for you based on what's going on in the industry and what's going on in my career. Yeah.
Right. Mason, this is all incredibly fascinating. I could talk to you for hours about this. It's a podcast about Hamilton, so we probably need to jump into Hamilton. But before we do, there's one other question I want to ask you about the work you do. In doing research on you, I was reading a little bit about when you made the jump in starting your own agency, and you had talked about having to battle against the stigma that Black agents can't negotiate. While how our country deals with race, it shouldn't be surprising that that's something you have to deal with. But given the fact that at the time you were talking about working in the NFL and in the NBA, in both cases, I think, what is it, 75% of the players in both those leagues are African American. Did players not want to look and work with someone who they identified with, or did they have that stigma as well?
So the quick answer is yes, they had the stigma also.
Wow.
And that is part of a much bigger conversation about self-image, self-worth,
sure,
self-love. There's, I could get real academic and esoteric about what is the development of one's self-image and ego and respect and love for their own culture and the confidence in people that look like them being professional. That's why people make such a big deal back in the day, years ago, about no positive Black images on television, right? And if you saw a Black image, the person was a pimp, or he was a drug dealer, or he was some sort of a criminal, and or it was always that that one smart guy that might be a computer guy, but he got killed first in the movie all the time. It was like, can we get a sustaining character somewhere here? And so when the Cosby stuff came out, and here you got a doctor married to a lawyer, people used to say in the Black community, that's not real. And we would say, excuse me?
Huh.
Why is it not possible that two Black professionals would marry each other and have, that big brownstone they had in the TV series? But there were many Black people who wouldn't watch the show because they said, this is not possible. Doesn't exist, because they never saw it on television and they didn't see it in their community. And so when you don't think that Black people can be an accountant or be a dentist or a doctor or a lawyer or a sports agent, then when one approaches you, you don't believe that they're real. You don't think that that's even a possibility, because that's not the image of what you think that role should look like. And I got out of law school in '89. It just happened to be a time when the tables were starting to shift a little bit, because my former boss and became my partner, Bill Strickland, who hired me at IMG, he was at ProServe in the '80s, and he was one of the first, not the first, one of the first African-American lawyers who were hired in one of the big agencies to represent A-list talent in sports. And so in '87, he was hired by a guy who was picked number 1 overall in the NBA draft. For the first time, he was the first Black agent to have the number 1 pick overall in the first, and that was Purvis Ellison out of Savannah, Georgia. And not to get too deep, but the fact that Savannah, Georgia is a southern town where there are a lot of Black professionals, Purvis didn't think there was a big deal that he hired a Black lawyer. He didn't know he was making history by doing it. He didn't do it to make history. He said he had a Black dentist, he had a Black doctor, now he has a Black sports agent. What's the big deal? His family always did. And so, but when he came, when it became to be, Bill was on the cover of Ebony magazine and all these things. They were like, whoa, a Black lawyer made it, the agent of the number 1 pick in the NBA draft. And everybody, Purvis is like, well, what's the big deal? Why shouldn't he be? But they're like, but you're the first player to see it that way.
That's fascinating. Wow.
1987. So I come out, and around that time, Barry Sanders picked a Black lawyer. Spike Lee, the movie producer, picked a Black lawyer, Black female lawyer in New York. And so it was like that kind of era of the late '80s. All of a sudden, Black lawyers were starting to get a chance, because the Black talent was starting to pick them for various reasons. I just talked about the Savannah thing because, that was the culture of the South, where you had Black professionals, but that wasn't the culture in New York or Cleveland or Philadelphia, as much as it was down there. So sometimes we got, the moon and the stars lined up right for that to happen. And all of a sudden there was this trend where the players started asking each other, hey, do you support your own community? Do you support your community by hiring and supporting Black-owned businesses? Because otherwise those businesses will never grow. If you don't buy and support businesses in your neighborhood, they'll never grow. They'll never sustain themselves. You'll have a lot of boarded up buildings if you go all the way across town to spend your dollar. I mean, so the idea of buying freedom was a concept in the early 80s that I learned through a guy named Tony Brown from Tony Brown's Journal. He was one of the longest running television producers of a talk show. He was like the Phil Donahue of the Black community. And Pepsi was his sponsor for like 30 years or so, right? But we would watch that because it was like the, McNear Lair show, or it was like the 60 Minutes of the Black community, because he had great topics, great hosts and guests, super intellectual. And I happened to have a Hamilton friend of mine actually was an intern for him. And he invited me to be in the studio audience to watch, to come there. And I was never seen a Black camera person, a Black director on set. I was like, whoa, I didn't know that could be possible either at the time in 1983, 84, right? So just seeing things changes a lot of us. We don't even think that a cameraman of a TV show is a Black person because you never saw one. You didn't, when you see it, you're like, whoa. But anyway, Tony was always pitching this thing called Buy Freedom. And his point about Buy Freedom was that we should buy from Black-owned businesses or white businesses who employ fairly. Those who have fair hiring practices, we should support them. When he called them freedom partners. Because if you support companies that don't hire people that look like you, you're supporting a business that doesn't try to develop or cultivate or doesn't help the health of our community or anybody that looks like us. They don't hire us, they won't hire us, but they'll take your money if you buy their product. Right. He said, you got to change this up. We have a purchasing power. And so we have to kind of do that. So not to be some revolutionary, it's just a logical thing. It's like, you got to spend money with companies that are going to be in favor of building a healthy community where we live. And because most of America was segregated, still, even though it wasn't like legally segregated like it was in the past, it just is. I mean, there are communities where there are most of the people that look like each other in those communities, and not just Black. I mean, these ethnic groups in Queens, you got a lot of people from Europe. They have communities, pockets, So anyway, if you support those pockets, they can grow and sustain themselves. Black community had a history of not doing that. And so anyway, when I came out in 89, I happened to catch the trend where we were getting a chance. And Bill Strickland was the leader of the pack in basketball. He hired me in 93 to come to IMG to be his vice president, only because I hounded him quite a bit when I met him. The first time I met him in like 91, I was, running around at these agent seminars, and this was the guy. Everybody said, this is the guy. He has the information. He's represented first round picks. If you're trying to learn how to do that, you got to emulate him. And he was always like, kind of push back and get out of here. I didn't have a role model. Get out of my face. I don't owe you anything. Bill was always a tough love guy, right? But that never deterred me at all. I would just see him at the agent stuff. Hey, can I sit next to you? What for? I'm like, because I just want to talk to you. He's like, oh, go ahead, right? And he let me sit with him, and I'd be pumping questions all the time. So how did you decide to get Purvis? How did you decide to do this? And how did you handle this? And how did you? And he was like, oh my God, you're such a pain. But he'd answer my questions because he thought it was encouraging that I was taking the initiative, not asking for a job. I was just trying to ask how you do stuff.
Do
it myself. And then in 93, he called me, and I was in North Carolina at a firm, and he called me and said, hey, Ashe, can I talk to you? I was like, Bill Strickland, about what? He said, hey, they told me they want me to expand my department here at IMG. And I thought about who can I hire that I don't have to train because I don't have time, who can handle the business and bring their own in and do things. And I really don't have anything to do with it. You can just come in and hit the ground running. And I know you got some small level clients, he said, that could probably grow to bigger clients if you had some support. And I'm gonna give you an offer. Would you like to work with me? And I was like, actually, no, because you've been real mean to me like the last 3-4 years. Every time I see you, you act like I'm just the biggest pain in your butt. So no, I'm not interested, right? And he was like, what? Do you know I'm at IMG, the world's largest agency? Mark McCormick started this whole industry. I said, I understand it, but you really mean. He said, I'm going to give you a chance to think about that, and you call me back. So I told my boss at the firm in North Carolina, who was a small 6-person law firm, a Black litigator who was a senior partner, that Bill Strickland called me, and he said, Bill Strickland from IMG? He said, what'd you say to him? I told him, get off my phone, man. I have a job. I'm very happy where I am. He goes, you're an idiot. He said, you call him back. You call it back so you can learn how to really do this thing on a global level. He says, we're trying to figure it out here in the regional level. That guy's going to be able to show you on the global level. You can always come back here. He said, you got a chance. This is your break. So I called Bill back. So what are you talking about exactly, right? He said, I'll come down and I see you. He was coming to the furniture market in High Point with his wife. He said, we'll be down next weekend. Why don't we just go out to dinner, you and your wife, and we can chat. So we did, and after a couple other meetings, I ended up hiring me, and we moved to DC in '93, and I became, director of team sports, but basketball and football. But it was like, because I had figured out, I wrote a business plan, I read the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, decided I was going to be on the talent side, left the firm I was at before, and started my own thing, got picked up by this guy in a 6-person firm. Once I decided this is what I'm going to do, things just started to come into place, basically. It just started to come into place. But it was a big break, really, when Bill called, and he was that way. He's that, that tough love guy anyway. He's like, look, I didn't have a mentor and I didn't have this and that. So I don't owe you anything. You got to figure it out on your own, right? But that was fine. Just to have my foot in the door and be able to see how it's done was enough for me. And then we ended up becoming super close. And then after 4 years, we left, and we joined hands and basically became Strickland and Ashe, which was the largest Black-owned sports agency in the country, because we had like 50 clients follow us, and came to us in football and basketball and entertainment. And it was great. I mean, there were other agencies out here, but, we had one of the biggest diversified agencies that was owned by 2 Black people not related. That was the big difference. So we talk about the image that we were saying before. There were no other talent agencies at the time in sports, particularly, that were owned by 2 Black individuals who were not related. There was 2 brothers that owned a business in Texas and one in Michigan. But as far as 2 Black individuals who had a joint bank account in the same office, like a real partnership. I know I'm being splitting hairs, but it's like,
yeah.
That didn't exist in '97. And so that was so unique about what we did. And then it changed this whole the perspective again of, Black people can work together. They can own companies together. They can share bank accounts together. You would think 1997 is we were just figuring this out.
When you said 97, just it stopped me for a second to think that's not, we're not talking ancient history here.
So that's why I'm trying to tell you is that, the habits and the perspectives and the self-confidence and the self-perceptions. And when you, for hundreds of years, hear that you're not capable or competent or not whatever, then you start believing it, right? But when you see otherwise, it just shocks people. And they're like, oh, but that's why, it's important. When I was at Hamilton, I went out of my way to try to find, people of color that were in the psychology field or when I'm writing books, I wanted to find authors that were of color to kind of just lift my, perception. And I'm going to tell you what really helped me was Black Enterprise magazine. My freshman year at Hamilton, outside the Career Center, there was a stack of magazines that was still wrapped. And I saw something say Black on the top, right? And I never heard of Black Enterprise magazine. So I went and ripped it open and I was like, what is this? This is like Forbes. This is like the Forbes or the Fortune magazine, but it's all Black businesses.
Right.
And I never heard of it. And I'll start looking through it. And they had a BE 100, the top 100 Black-owned companies, car dealerships and all sorts of stuff. And I was like, whoa. And so every month it came out at that time. And I would go get this magazine, and it just absorbed the fact that there were Black-owned businesses, but I never saw them before, really. And it's just like, you got to see it, And so it really changed my perspective in the confidence level that if they could do it, I could do it. But you got to see somebody that looks like you do it.
Yeah.
For it to make sense sometimes, and that just those little imageries made a big difference for me. And I think what we did sparked a few people and they started to pick up. And, there's still not any major Black-owned sports agencies that are owned by a bunch of people. It's still not. But what we did was really kind of counter to what was going on. But it elevated the perception of Black professionals. And then there's been Black professors now in all these different schools. And I've been teaching for 15 years. And I was hired by a Black guy from Wharton who brought me in to be his kind of successor, because now he went on to a different school. So it's just like, but nobody would have hired me at Wharton. I mean, he's there 30 years and he knew me and knew that I was able to do the job and brought me in. But it's that kind of networking that happens. And we have to believe in each other, because if we don't, nobody will, kind of thing. So it's a fascinating existence in a very niche business, especially talent, where there's a lot of people of color in the talent business, but we're normally the client. We're not normally
right.
The service provider,
Right.
But now there's wealth managers and there's, general counsels of teams and there's, executives of leagues. And it's a whole different day, than it was 30 years ago.
Yeah. You mentioned seeking out those positive influences while you were at Hamilton, whether it was through, Black authors or Black teachers. I don't think during your time as a student, Hamilton College would have been the first place one would think of going to find positive Black influences. But yet you, in your essay you penned for the We Are Hamilton issue of the magazine, you talk very glowingly about your experience at Hamilton. So talk to me a little bit about your experience there.
Well, that's interesting because I talk about this often, and that is my wife is a graduate of Spelman College. Mm-hmm. and which is a HBCU all Black female college, and she's actually on the trustee board there as well. And when I thought about colleges, there really were no HBCUs in the Northeast, and I didn't really have any connection to anybody that went to an HBCU that was trying to advise me on colleges. And so that was never even a thought in my mind to go to a predominantly Black college, to the extent that we looked at a few on family vacations, driving around. I remember going to Morehouse one time, just driving around, and I remember looking at Ebony magazine. They had Fisk and Jet magazine. I used to read a lot. Fisk was one of these firms in schools in Hampton. I read a little bit about, but I didn't know anybody that went there to ask them, should I risk going without having seen it, that sort of thing. So honestly, it just was not an option that was in my mind, because I didn't have anybody close to me that was pushing me to look at that or to even understand the benefit. So my father was very much in favor of a school that mirrored society. And that was his thing. He was like, no, you should go to a school that mirrors society. And so he thought that I should go to a school that had, as close as we could find, the percentages of society. And deal with all the different kinds of people of the world, basically, like now, not go to somewhere and get, the benefits of an HBCU, which I understand now teaching at Howard, but I didn't understand the confidence in the strength that you built in the development and culture, how you're cultivated, the skill level, the confidence level, and all that stuff. I didn't know anything about that stuff. Not that that's the only way you can get it, but certainly I had to get mine from my house, from my home, right? My parents were very hardworking, and they were very, focused on history and making sure I understood my history, and so I got it from my house. Some people will go and they can benefit it from the school, but that wasn't the case. When I got to Hamilton, I was there with this plan of dealing with the world and all the different groups and getting a job. This school had a history of getting people placed in jobs at a 90% rate and getting into medical school or law school at a very high rate. Those are the things that mattered to me. It was a small class ratio, faculty to student. Those are the things that I looked at when I looked at the Barron's book to figure out where I was going to go in the Northeast, because I was going to go to school in the Northeast. I wanted to be within striking distance of New York City. Mm-hmm. And if you do that, there's not a whole lot of HBCUs that are in striking distance like that, number one. But number two, I just didn't know anybody that went to Cheney State maybe or some of those Lincoln universities outside of Philly. I didn't know anybody that went to those places. And I wasn't going to a school that I didn't know anybody unless I could go visit or they're saying the things that I'm looking for, which Hamilton had great material that talked about the benefits. And my parents were like, wherever you go, you got to have a job every summer. Mm-hmm. You got to have a permanent job. Mm-hmm. Like, do not come here with a degree and no job. So if I heard anything, that was my marching orders, right? Huh. And so I didn't hear some of the other stuff, some of the other benefits and stuff that you get from other places. It just wasn't the loudest ring in my head, right? Yeah. And so I hit the nail on the head for the things I was looking for, not in a major city. I wanted a remote place because I was scared if I was going to NYU or somewhere, I'd be hanging out in Greenwich Village playing jazz guitar. So I was like, look, I need to be somewhere away from all of that, right? But I can get to it with a reasonable price to come home to eat my mother's food. You know, every 6 to 8 weeks we had a break. So I was like, I got to eat her food every 6 to 8 weeks, right? But I want to be far enough away. Then you go to campus to visit, and it was like a golf course on campus, and it was so beautiful on a mountain. I was like, "Are you serious? It's like a country club." You know, so it just appealed to me. And then I met some students of color on my visit because I came for the minority student weekend they had organized. And I met some students of color that I thought was super smart, and they were going to still be there if I came the next year. You know, Sandy Smith and Audrey Moore and these people, they were like, look, if you come here, we're going to help you. We're going to make sure you don't fail out. You know, I was like, oh, this is what I'm talking about. There's a support network. There's a safety net. You know, this is a place it just hit all the things I was looking for.
Wow.
And sure enough, you know, when I did come, I applied early decision and I got in. I was like, I'm it. This is it, right? And then when I got there, you know, you could play jazz guitar. You know, there was a couple of little bands that I was able to join. I'm like, whoa, you know, I was the jazz guitarist on campus. You know, I was like, this is cool, right? You know, basketball was a little frustrating because they had already recruited some of the people they wanted. And I was behind in calculus and everything by the time the tryouts came. So I didn't play basketball. I wanted to try to walk on, but I didn't even try my freshman year. And that was a disappointing thing because that was a big part of my life in high school. But I had to decide if I'm going to try to do pre-med the first 2 years, you know, I need to really let this basketball go. And ultimately I had let the basketball go, but that guitar picked up. And so I was able to really explore the artist side of my brain, really enjoyed that. And so I didn't miss anything. I mean, we had nice community, you know, we would go visit Colgate, we go to Syracuse sometimes, you know, but really I was really focused on, you know, getting through the pre-med thing for 2 years. That was not working. I was not doing well in that. And so I had to really kind of double down and say, okay, what am I really good at? But I came here thinking you had to take stuff that's hard because that's how you challenge yourself. I had the wrong perception. You know, things that were coming easy for me was psychology and English and philosophy. And I thought, oh, you got to stay away from things that's too easy, right? You know?
Yeah.
But that's what I enjoyed is why
I made that mistake my first semester of my freshman year. And I set myself back big time. I took all these classes I had no business taking.
Exactly. So
I feel your pain on that one.
Oh yeah. So that's why I think that once I got there, it became this challenge that, you know, this is a really competitive school, which they said. I mean, Barron's book said this is a highly competitive environment, but you're going to get the job. You can get into grad school. I had a supportive community, you know, including a Black and people of color community that was supportive. We didn't have any professors really. We had, I remember one English person, I think maybe, but I didn't English. I never took her for a class, but we had a couple of administrators. Miss Johnson was there, and Andy Wirtz was working at the Bristol, you know, but we didn't have any, from my understanding, I don't remember any really Black professors. So that was an issue. So I just decided to be a part of this movement to change that and to open the doors and to teach our history, because we had one class I thought that was like Black Man in America, and I thought, they got to be kidding me, right? This is not going to work. So when we started talking to the administration, they were like, well, do something. So we had to mobilize and figure out, how do we find professors and how do you go about getting petitions from the school, from the students' body, and how do you persuade the department heads? We got involved to try to make a difference, you know, because we knew the school is so great, but is missing a few things, you know. So instead of just leaving, I'm going to try to fix it, you know, and that's what we ended up doing. I didn't get a chance to take Vince O'Dampton's his class, but he taught the year I left. But I was part of the selection process committee to go and interview all these different professors that we were considering, and then, you know, I voted on him and some other people. And
he was one of my favorite professors. So thank you for your hand in getting him there. Oh yeah.
Well, I never got to take him, but I thought he was very impressive when he came, and we did down some, you know, some other people that we had. But it's a very interesting thing. It's understanding, having not traveled outside the country. I mean, it was just a lot for a student to try to help figure out how to launch a program like that when we don't really know. We're in the dark. One of his what do you say, our alternate person that we almost picked was this guy who's Chinese from Jamaica.
Hmm.
And it stands out in my mind because I was completely ignorant to the fact that Chinese people were native to Jamaica for many generations. I didn't know this. And this guy had a patois, heavy Jamaican accent. And I scratching my head going, how is this Chinese guy talking with this patois accent, right? And I even said to him, why do you keep talking like that? And he was like, young man, this is exactly why you should hire me, because you're ignorant. You need to go outside the country and realize that there are people from different cultures that live in these places. You only see Jamaicans as one thing. That is so ignorant. And I was like, well, yeah, you're kind of right. You know,
Wow.
I just never seen a Chinese guy with speaking to Jamaican. I thought he was like teasing the culture. He was like, this is why you guys need this class. You need this department because you don't understand world politics. You don't understand culture. And I was like, you're right. I really don't. But, you know, Vince is from Africa, so I'm going with Vince. And my first vote is going to be the guy with the dashiki on. Let's go start with that. So, I mean, it was a basic thought, but I knew he would build it, you know. But I mean, but I knew I needed to learn. I did not understand the world like that, you know, and what groups help build these countries and these islands and stuff. I just didn't know.
And now you're a trustee of the place.
Yeah.
What are you focused on as a trustee there in the room?
Well, I just became,
because I said this before. I have this grand vision of the trustees. There's like robes and everyone sits around a table and it's like a secret society. And
I think, you know, I was a trustee for a few years, 4 years before, 2002 to 2006, as an alumni voted trustee. Right? And it was an eye-opening experience because I felt like that, sitting around the table, you know, and a lot of really famous, real powerful people from big companies were there, both alums and non-alums. And I learned a lot during that time to see how a school like Hamilton is built and developed and sustained. You know, it takes a lot of thought. It takes a lot of expertise. It takes a lot of deliberation for it to happen. And I was just absorbing all of that the first 4 years. To have a chance to come back now and be, you know, a charter trustee, and I think is a major privilege, but it's almost an obligation to me because I have a unique experience having been at Hamilton early and then having that chance to be a trustee for a minute and now come back and try to help prepare the school for the future, which is the changes. The world changes, and what we're preparing our students to do in the world is different than it was 30 years ago, you know? Right. And so I'm hoping to be able to have some influence on what we do to prepare our students and who those students look like and who they are. We've done a great job. I mean, the school has done a really, really good job, I think. So, you know, I don't feel like I have to come back to try to flip it upside down. I think that, you know, I want to help sustain the quality and improve our services that we deliver, the goods that we deliver, you know, the classes, the courses, the speakers. We've always done a great job on all of that stuff. I mean, people from all over the world always come on campus, you know. And so I just want to help sustain the thing and then be open to best practices as they develop, whatever that is. You know, I'm open to that. And I want to be a part of that dialogue to make sure that we service our community, you know, and prepare our students to really service the world, because the world is complex. I mean, we got so many different things going on right now. You know, and it's no one way to do it. So I'm just happy to be at the table, to be a team player, to help you know, sustain the school, because it's done so much for me. I mean, as far as eye-opening experiences, relationships, in my career, everywhere I've been, there's been somebody from a Hamilton connection that's had some impact on every move I've made, pretty much. It's been amazing, you know. And where I am now at the firm, I'm working with a guy from my class, 1985, who basically recruited me to this law firm, you know. And I'm like, you know, it just never ends. I'm like, are you kidding me? This is like the Hamilton for life kind of thing. It just never ends. I'm 58 years old, been out of school 35 years. I'm still getting calls from Hamilton alums to ask to work on projects together. And I'm like, are you serious? This is fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, what better can you do? So that's why I'm saying, like, you know, perhaps my wife would say, you know, you'd probably be a doctor if you'd gone to HBCU, because they would have met, you know, they would have cultivated you into the doctor that you wanted to be.
Oh, interesting.
But I got there and I didn't have AP classes, and everybody in pre-med at Hamilton had AP, and I was just so far behind. It was a hard thing to kind of change the gap. She's like, yeah, but not every college is like that. You know, some colleges will figure out a way to get you change to close the gap if you really wanted to be a doctor. And some schools, everybody didn't have AP. So I would not have stood out like that. I mean, there's some places that you'd have figured it out and you're taking it at your pace. But Hamilton was one of those places you got to come fight to survive, and it was like, and I was ready to fight. I'm not leaving here. I'm going to do well. I'm going to figure out what I do well here. I'm not transferring, and ultimately psychology and philosophy and all those things really were exciting. And Bob Simon was my professor and mentor and all that stuff there.
Yeah.
And Miss Johnson's support. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to make this work, But it's true. Maybe I would be a different career if I had gone to a different place, but I'm very happy with what happened.
All right, that's Mason Ashe, class of 1985. That was fun. I really enjoyed that one. I tell you, he gave one of the best explanations of the importance of representation that I've heard in a long time. Incredible stuff. He had some great stories. My thanks to Mason for joining this week. You have been listening to Had I Known on WHCL-FM, Clinton, New York. Had I Known.buzzsprout.com. Had I Known Show on social media. As always, my thanks to Dr. Michael Woods for supplying the music on this show. And once again, Doc is going to play us out. Hope you enjoyed the show. Talk to you next week.
Had I Known podcast show on your radio or take it to go.